my side, everything okay. Welcome to the first Java user group session, and welcome from Munich. So the session is, I guess, in UMU or UME. I still don't know what is exactly spelled or pronounced. So we have minus 4 degrees in Munich right now. So I'm really curious how cold is it on your side. And yeah, welcome and start with the content. So what we will do today is the following. So you already asked some questions, and I thought I would just answer the questions. And feel free to ask whatever you like using the chat. So you will see the chat on the homepage. And if we cover all your questions, if we answer all your questions, we are basically done, and we can go home. So let's start. Let's start with the content. So yeah, Java user group, and it's going to be a Java EE conversation, a 2016 starter. So about me, I'm a freelancer Java developer. I'm spending all my time in Java EE projects. From time to time, I would say 2 weeks a year or 3 weeks a year, I'm delivering workshops, mostly at Munich airport. And there were already attendees from Sweden and also from UMU in Munich. And now the funny story is they found, I would say back then it was before Christmas in Munich, were about 5 degrees plus, 5 to 10 degrees plus Celsius. And they found it extremely cold. So I was really fascinated by that, because they had really thick jackets and gloves. And we had attendees from Costa Rica and Utah, and they found it actually warm. So what's funny is, like you are not accustomed to really low temperatures, it seems like. Okay. I write a blog from time to time, not to forget things, or if I find something out, so I just put it on my blog. So this is the URI to the workshops. If you like to stay in touch, what I usually do, I announce such events like, for instance, this one using the mailing list. AirHacks News is about 600 subscribers right now, and there is a bunch of on-demand workshops. One of them is Effective Java EE. I also have one Java EE testing and Java Bootstrap, and there is more in the pipeline. Okay, AirHacks TV, the first Monday of the month. It is exactly the same infrastructure like this. So what I do, I gather the whole month questions on my GitHub gists. So you can ask whatever you like. It should be Java and Java EE related, and I try to answer everything in about 1 hour. Okay, and if you like, come to Munich. So this is, we had already a lot of attendees from UMU and Sweden and all over the place. So the next workshops are in January, Microservices and continuous Java 7 testing. So, and this was the very last slide. And now I switch to chat. So minus 15 degrees, so a little bit colder than Munich, but still manageable. So I was in Bavarian Forest here in Germany. So there's a lot minus 20, minus 25. So we are on the same climate almost. So okay, if you like, ask the very first question. So use the chat, ask the questions. If not, I will go to the Google Chrome, and there is one of the questions, and I start with the first one. What do you think a typical web application should look like? How should it be built? So I think the trend is going clearly to single-page applications. So it's not a website anymore. It is going to be an application. So it will behave like, let's say, Swing in the old days, but is written with JavaScript and HTML5. This is what I see more and more. Whether everything is going to be like this, let's see. But this is what is expected right now. On the other hand, what I also see the trend to native applications. So what I would say, so HTML5 was very interesting on native devices, but right now the trend is going to native apps, so written in, I would say, how it's called, Swift or Objective-C on iOS, or not the Android Java flavor on Android devices. But the question is clearly about how it should look like from Java EE perspective. And this question is not going asked a lot because what usually happens, I would say, the vast majority of all my Java EE applications come with REST interface. So this is how we expose the business logic. And if you have the REST interface, then it's very easy to build an HTML5 app. What is this usually? So in Java world, I would say 80% is Angular. React is gaining traction, and there is some, functional JavaScript flavors, but I would say Angular 1 is still gaining momentum, and Angular 2 is on horizon, but I don't think it is can be used productively right now, or it could be used productively, but the tooling and everything is not as easy as expected, I would say right now, but it will change quickly. So usually, how a typical application should look like. So you have one part which is Angular, it's completely independent from the backend, and the backend is usually Java EE applications exposed with JAX-RS endpoints. And these JAX-RS endpoints are in charge of exposing the business logic via REST. What's more important, how JAX-RS should look like. So how REST should look like, and it is longer story, but my personal quality metric is if a business person would be forced to look at the REST URI, it should know what's going on there. So the URI, the REST interfaces should be recognizable and self-descriptive. So this is how it should look like. Okay, I think this question is answered. And okay, so this is the first flavor. What's stunning or interesting is I supported some startups in the last 2 years, and they used Java EE because of productivity. And the funny story is all of the startups used JSF and prime phases in particular because of productivity. And what I told you right now with the Angular, what I see Angular mostly in enterprise projects. So it's a really crazy world. Yeah, like the huge companies using Angular. Just look at the interview, for instance, Commerzbank, what I wrote. They just started with Angular right away, and they were really happy with it. And also the Tipicamp startup is also using Angular JSF, which is startup. On the enterprise project are using Angular. So and why they are using JSF and are really happy with JSF? Because in startup, if you are the boss, you can decide how the design looks like. So you can just pick the, for instance, prime faces components, and if you're happy with it, you are basically done. But in enterprise, the design is or the functional requirements are not coming from one person; they are coming from different departments, and therefore it is a lot harder to implement all requirements of the world with component frameworks like JSF. So my observation is startups tend to choose JSF because they are really fast, and enterprises are choosing HTML5 because they have no idea what is coming. So the requirements are not known yet. So they should be as flexible as possible. So I will go briefly to the chat and see whether you're happy with the answer. So there is no news. What it means, you are probably happy. By the way, if you don't have the access to the chat, you can also use Twitter and send me a question, or use the hashtag, for instance, airhacks, or use airhacks because it is. I'm searching for this right now. Yeah. Any questions? No questions. So and if you by accident tune in from somewhere else, just ask also questions. So you don't have to attend the UMEA JUG. So when using REST, which level of REST is appropriate? When is HTOS something to strive for? How to implement it? So HTOS. This is Hyper Engine as something. Hypermedia is the engine of application state. I always forget it. and this is the description. So what I would say, something like this is nice. So get account, I would say even not account, but accounts is a plural. And if you do this, it is self-descriptive. Everyone knows what's going on. And the response is like this, and this is also self-descripting. So you have dippercent withdraw transfer close. And I would say I would strive to something like this, but I wouldn't exaggerate. So I mean, if you, the question is now when it is good enough. So this is the basic question. And in our case, we were happy in case the UI team could call us without asking too many questions. So then you know you are basically done. But you know, just using HTOS and aiming for be a perfect HTOS is like, you know, aiming for have a perfectly normalized database, which can be a goal in a university, but I don't think it is a goal in a real world project. In a real world project, no one should call, no one should strive for database normalization or REST HTOS, how it's actually pronounced, HTOS quality, rather than saying, okay, I'm exposing a self-descripting REST URI. Why self-descriptive? Because I'm lazy. I don't like to write a lot, and I don't need generators, so I write just self-descriptive REST and hope no one will ask any questions about, you know, how to use the REST endpoint. And in my eyes, if you look, let's say PayPal REST API, there are some good references. If you go to PayPal, this is, for instance, one of the references. If you see curl, for instance, I would like to use, I would like to request a payment with bearer token and whatever, and what I get back is the payment with all transactions. So if, let's go back, what we also see, look up a payment. So payments, payment ID. So no surprises. So I think if you know what payment is, you would be able, you know, to use the PayPal REST API. The same is true for GitHub REST API. So let's see, not authorization. Issues, you know, get issues, get user issues, get organizations, org ID issues. So there are no surprises. So if someone knows GitHub and looks at the URI, then it's clear, you know, what to expect. And I would say something like the PayPal API or GitHub API would be good enough, or something like app.net REST API. It's also nice. So let's say we have lookup user. Where is the URI? Here. Users, user ID. Or I would like to block user. So let's go here. So post, users, user ID, block. No surprises. So I would say I would strive for something like this, regardless how complete it is in, you know, from the perspective of HTOS. So, any questions? So, are you still happy? Yeah, there's always some lag. I don't know why, but there is some lag, you know, probably because of speed of light. So, 89591 anonymous. Are you happy in UMU or UMEA? Yes, no, and anyone else? So we have already 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 attendees, which is nice. Okay. Which patterns do you recommend? Hexagonal architecture layers. So I would say, so I spent most of them, or all of my time in enterprise Java EE projects right now. And what I recommend is simple architectures. And I would try to draw my architecture or my architecture. It's actually architecture from Ivar Jacobson called ECB. And it always looks like this. And I actually draw it over and over again, but get still questions regarding to this, so it seems to be an interesting topic. So my first principle is I organize the code using domain responsibilities, never technical responsibilities. You might say, okay, it's obvious, but what it actually means in my case is I don't use names like exceptions, beans, DTOs, DAOs. No one cares about this. Rather than we start with a package, and this package has business meaning, like for instance, university or students, but not, interfaces. So, and all packages have functional names, and what the names come from, they are actually the essential entities, so the core concepts of your project. And there are a couple of such folders. If I had layering like presentation, and business, this would be GSF. And inside business, I would have the components like university, students, and courses. Something like this. Okay. So again, so what we do, you start with, let's say, Sweden.jug.application name, dot, and then I would say presentation, and business. Presentation is JSF and is optional. So it means if we don't have JSF, we don't have this layer, and then we also don't have the business layer. So we just remove the business altogether. So this business layer is only if we have presentation. And then I start with packages, which are actual components with business names. So what we said is students. So, and now this is what I borrowed from Ivar Jacobson. What I really like is the entity control boundary pattern. And the boundary is the first layer. Then we have the middle layer, which is optional. And we have the entity layer, which is also optional. But usually it is there because the entities are, the lifeblood. These are the domain objects, which are usually also persistent. So the boundary are EGBs because of transactions, controls are POJOs, and entities are JPA objects or POJOs. And the name of the packages is boundary control entity. This is what we do in projects, and I interview already several projects on my blog, and they tend to be really happy with this choice. So you can, I think last week I interviewed someone who started with Java EE and uses boundary control entity pattern. So okay, since we're using, there are no questions left. It's perfectly simple. So, and with that it's actually set. This is our architecture. So if there is something to be reused, let's say we have a package with common functionality. Let's say here, I don't know. What you could do, homework. Let's say homework is not a external service, but it can be reused between different components. So this is just a component without a boundary, just with the control and with the entity, and can be shared between the other components. Now, as you probably know, Now, how many developers are building the components? I would say a pizza team, so 2 to 5 developers is enough. Everything what is great is built by extremely small teams. So if you have this, all the components are in a war. And this war is small enough, so there are no external dependencies. In Java EE world, I try to avoid any dependencies. War has to be small. If the war is small, deployment is faster. So we have the war, and there is another war. And this war has to communicate with the other war. And if we do this, what we get is communication between wars, and now you can call communication between wars microservices. And therefore, all my projects are right now microservice projects, because what we do, if the application is large enough, we have a view wars with a view teams, and they have to communicate with each other. So right now, we not only covered ECB, but we also are microservice compliant, which what means actually we are compatible with any conference right now. Okay, I hope it is clear. I will briefly look at the chat. Where is my chat? Here. Oh, very good question. So do you think it's okay to have a separate REST API for the user interface besides the one for integration? We never did this, but if you could explain me why it is better, it's okay. If there is no explanation, there is just because you would like to be flexible or whatever, then I will reject the idea. But if you say, okay, the user interface has completely different set of requirements than the internal intra microservice REST API, then it's just fine. I actually never did it. So our external REST API was always the same. And very popular question is, do you have any preferences on REST API versioning? Yes, I have. When to use the versioning in the URI, and when to use, someone said, hello, master Adam Bean. So I'm the master branch. There could be a clone of me. It's like, like a branch. What is the pros and cons of the versioning? So why PayPal is versioning the URI? Because PayPal is powerful enough. So what I can afford is to provide multiple versions at the same time, and the users will migrate to the newest version. This is not always true in the enterprise. So if I, in my project, would introduce, would like to introduce, versions in the URI and would just upgrade the URI, no one would care. This is the problem. So I would have, to find the department and say, hey, use please my recent version. And they say, yeah, but the old is working and we are not interested. We have no resources to upgrade. So I would say, if you can control the client and the backend, then use the version in the URI. If you cannot, if you don't know the client and you are not as powerful as PayPal, Amazon, whatever, I don't think it is a good idea to version the URI or use the URI for versioning, rather than being always backward compatible. In one point of time, we say, now it's a really big change and we just change everything. So like, try to be backward compatible as long as possible. In one point of time, you say, now we introduce breaking changes. So what it actually mean, you will never be able to remove anything. So this is the problem. Okay, you could use also media type. This is true, but I don't even know what I would do. Not using version altogether and be backward compatible. So what it would mean, I would have to use system tests and just check out automatically all known versions of the system test, and all versions of the system test will test the most recent service URI. Okay, the user interface has requirements and the, okay, I see you. So what do you mean is, okay, for the user interfaces, you will need a, how to call it, a crippled REST. So I would say you are just designing completely differently, you know, to just a driver for UI could be, you know, the screen or not the screen, the view and not the business. Then then you will have a valuable, I would say, higher level REST API and another one for Snape UI, highly optimized for the UI. So I see the point. So yes. So, but I would consider the UI REST API as throwaway API. So I would say, okay, it will change whenever the user interface changes, and the other API will be like the canonical API. Okay. Other questions? No questions. So the next question is what I think about domain-driven design, strategic and tactical patterns. So actually, strategic and tactical is the question, what do you mean by that? But domain-driven design have strong opinions. It works for more complex applications. So if your application is just CRUD, create, read, user, update and delete, and you know, you're just manipulating the data sitting in a database, then domain-driven design will lead to anemic entities. But if your application is more sophisticated, when it is the case when you, for instance, have to, usually it is a graph of objects which represent something. Like we had several problems in transport, or problems. There was complex algorithms in transport management systems where we had to schedule transports and optimize them, or in IoT world where there were connections between devices with different capabilities. Then domain-driven design was perfect. And what it actually meant, the entities, the JPA objects, had behavior and were persistent. The controls were dumb. They were just, you know, we only implemented or not even existing. So we had mainly boundaries with queries, like the repository pattern. Then we had domain objects with behavior, and controls were basically not existent. And this was the domain-driven design in Java EE. I call that the gateway pattern. So if you have my book, you can lend it for free from Amazon and search for gateway. You will find how it works. So what you usually will do, you will have a stateful session bean or session scoped CDI bean and extended entity manager. And then you basically can go with domain-driven design. So domain-driven design is usually stateful, because if you were stateless, you will have to reload all the objects at each request, which can lead to slow or some performance overhead. Okay. Now we covered this. Just go back to the chat. No questions in the chat. So what it basically means is that we will be done in a few minutes, because we will cover all the questions. If you don't have any additional questions, we are done per definition. So microservice versus right-sized services. Is transactions over several services always a bad idea? It is always a bad idea, because it's not even possible to properly implement that. Now the explanation. Oh, now it's a nice question. Have you experience with scenarios where JDBC is preferable to JPA? Yes. If you are thinking about reports, so what do you usually do with reports? You would use tools like Jasper reports or Eclipse BERT. And in under this particular case, it is really hard to implement that with JPA objects. JDBC is just preferable. Also, if you are not interested in the entities rather than in the whole table. So what it means, you are interested in, let's say, exports, imports, and data transformations. And I actually even implemented something like this. It's based on JDBC and somehow popular. And this thing is called Enhydrator. So, and what nHitrator does, it just reads something from a JDBC data source, and you can apply Lambda Java 8 functions to it for data transformations, and it stores in JDBC back or writes a JSON file or whatever you like, and is used in commercial projects actually a lot. And so you can see it just reads from database and writes CSV. This is the whole configuration, and this is JDBC without even Java EE. So this is Java 8 project, everything. And there is one particular adapter for something like JPA. So you can read from JDBC or read from CSV and write JPA objects, but it's not the general case. So this is, I think, a good example where JDBC is better suited than JPA. Because if I would use JPA for this, I would have to generate JPA entities for all possible tables. And with that, I can just say, go to table, make from, you know, column named student or first name, or let's say, make from a student table and column age an integer, you know, and I don't know, compute the days and put it to a CSV. Using this, so I don't have to implement any coding for this. It's almost like scripting, and it actually uses scripting behind the scenes as well. You can use Nashorn to implement the business logic. But with JPA, it wouldn't be as easy. I would have to recompile the whole project on any change. So having said this, so what you probably see is that JPA is more about type safety, and JDBC is more about flexibility. Also, if you know what you are doing, I would say in a classical enterprise projects, most of the use cases are implemented with JPA, and for really performance critical stuff, we still use JDBC. Or if you don't have Java 7 yet, you have to use Java 6. So you will have to use JDBC to access, for instance, stored procedures or functions. Perfect. So we covered one more question, and now microservices, Rightsize services. Is transaction over several services always a bad idea? So microservices, the term micro, I would say is as stupid as the no in NoSQL databases, because no one knows what micro actually means. And, you know, just think about this, you know, distributing, so putting one Java method as a microservice and call it remotely. As you probably remember, the old J2E days, we were already there. So the very first container managed persistence entity beans were all remote. So every getter and setter was remote. So we could call, you know, the old entity beans microservices because you had to call several getters and setters remotely, you know, to even update one row in a database. And of course, it never worked. So the subsequent versions were always local. So there was no such. So a remote service has always to be coarse-grained because of latency and remoting. Okay, microservices, Rightsize services, and transactions. Is it a bad idea? Yes, it always is. So, first, how microservices are deployed. So we have one war and another war. And what I forgot to mention back then is these wars are deployed on an application server. There is no shared deployments. Let's say Payara and Whitefly. And we have, of course, Liberty Profile from IBM, a great one. Profile from IBM, and WebLogic Server, also nice, the newest one from Oracle. So, and the thing is, each application server runs on own JVM, and JVM. And in my case, actually, and in most of my project is running on Docker. So the point is, each war runs in its own container. You can say it's crazy, lots of overhead. Actually, on my application server right now, or on my hardware server right now, is a new one. I just introduced a new one. I have right now about 6 different containers, and in total, they use 8 gig of RAM, and it works very performant and very well. The point being is because we have multiple processes. And why we have multiple processes? Because we need the maximum independence, isolation. This is the whole point of microservices. I can ship, here version 1.1 and here version 2, and they are independent of each other. The problem is, what if we create here another microservice which has to call all the others microservices? And as you can probably see, this, I would attempt to stun transaction here, it would mean two-phase commit and XA. And two-phase commit and XA, I would say, is a really bad idea to use it. And it rarely works because there are usually multiple vendors involved. And what you would do, you would probably try to use, a two-phase commit over JAX-RS and so over ASCII. And this may of course work, but usually it doesn't. Why not? Because if you have two-phase commit, you will have to deal with XI exception. And the XA exception comes with a lot of problems. And for instance, what I like the most, or is the funniest one, heuristic mix. The transaction branch has been heuristically committed and rolled back. So what it basically means, this was rolled back and this was committed, and you will have to resolve the errors, which is hard to resolve, but usually the errors are ignored. So what you should do instead of relying on synchronous chaining of interactions here, you should think about fire and forget. So what it will mean, you would say, okay, hey student, or not a student, let's say Amazon, I would like to buy this book. And Amazon says, okay, got it, but wait until I check, the availability. And then it writes again to the user, hey, it is available. Would you like to still have it? And say, yes, I will, and it will just order the book here. Say, okay, the book is ordered, but can be, that, I don't know, the DHL or whatever, the mail system is overloaded, but it will come to you tomorrow. Is it okay? They will say, yes, okay, then I will charge you, and I will charge you with this system. So it's like a ping pong, and this works really well. So what it basically means, you will have to refactor existing applications to achieve that. Okay, and Rightsize. So this is why I don't actually get the microservice idea a lot, because this we did for years. We didn't use Docker. We used virtualization for this. But my idea was always to create, small teams are delivering, building small wars, and they can communicate with each other. So at the beginning, we used Corba and remote RMI, remote method invocations. We actually never used SOAP. And now we can use REST. I hope you are happy. And yes, you are happy because you even ask another great question. How do you test the contract between microservices? So this is actually stuff from the last 2 weeks of workshops. So they try to generate, code, generate API. I don't believe in code generation a lot in microservices, because if you generate the code, the question is asked always, who is in charge of the code and what happens if the generated code changes. So what I think should happen instead is the following. So we have one microservice. I would say, let's microservice is a war, which this is the order system. And I would like to use this microservice, and I'm the shipping system, shipment. And this is one team, and this is another team. Okay, So what I would do, or what we did, is the following. We created a system test here with JAX-RS 2.0 client, and the system test tests the order system, but the system test is implemented from perspective of the users. So why we did this? Because it's the easiest possible thing to do. If you have the system tests here, what they also wrote is the client classes, the POJOs, which can be reused. So from the system tests, we get the controls. So there is not a lot of waste involved. Okay, and now comes the trick. So this war, there's a CI pipeline, is built here completely and tested with own system tests. But what we also have is like, independent Jenkins. And this independent Jenkins runs the system tests here. So what it means, this pipeline tests everything from the perspective of this project, and then another shared pipeline is running with all different system tests from different teams. And before we release this service, this project manager of this service can look at the pipeline and see, hey, this works, but this is broken. And the question is, should we still release or not? And now I would say it becomes obvious that a change of this service breaks another service. So this is what we do in projects, and this works well enough. Because if the quality of this system test is low, then then this project doesn't care. Then everything is green, and this project will break, which is a pity. But then they should increase the quality of the system tests here. Okay, we covered this, and now look at the next question. Oh, when JSF is useful, still useful, is absolutely useful. The question is how to use JSF. And what we do is the following. Primefaces.org, I think. So let's say, okay, go to Primefaces, go to the showcase. And what you see is lots of components, and we have, for instance, the data and data grid. And data is the most problematic stuff, data list and whatever. And the deal is the following. We used successfully JSF in projects. We were extremely productive with it, but the deal was the following. We went to the users and told them, look at the showcase. You can choose whatever you like, but you get it as is. We can probably change the font and the color, but nothing else. There is no behavior change possible. So it was not completely true, but we say it was impossible. So then the user just, picked from the showcase the components and say, okay, we would like this component or this component or this component, but they never got the idea that, I don't know, within the list, they would like to have, a table for 4 and a tree for 5. So with that, JSF is ultra productive. What should you never do is to attempt, to extend the already existing components, because what you are doing then effectively is you are forking the framework. And this is almost criminal, because if Primefaces releases a newer version, you will have to update your fork, which actually never happens, and then you will stick with the old Primefaces version, and probably with security issues or whatever. So JSF is extremely productive. I would say it has a bright future if you are using it properly, and properly means if you are using the components as they are. If you have additional requirements, I would rather contribute the code to Primefaces or ask them to fix. So what we did in previous projects, we hired the Primefaces guys, so we bought support. And they extended the Primefaces framework for us, and it worked great. So this is not okay. Any questions? So I think I answered all your questions from the website. Any other questions? I'm waiting a bit. If not, we are basically set. No questions? If you have any questions left, what you can always do, you can go to the guests from a GitHub account. And this is the 23rd EHEXQA. It is the 1st February. So it is in about 2 weeks. And you can ask whatever you like, and I will answer them at the 1st February, 6 p.m., the first Monday of the month. Is there a way to quickly get a Java EE projects up and running? I mean, how it looks like. You go here and say, then I say new Java class, SE, need for speed, and I hope my servers are not running. Let's look at the server. Okay, looks good. Run. Will ask me which server to choose. I will just choose Payara for now and deploy it. With a little bit of luck, it should work out of the box. So this is what you have to do to have a service. Java EE Microservice. If you look at this, you only need one single dependency, nothing else, and you are basically set. So resources, what was it? Hello, need for speed. So period. So this is whatever you need. If you would like to extend that, you can say, okay, I get a class called order manager, and it just gets the status not available, and this will be the boundary. I will put it to the boundary, and this is going to be a stateless EJB, and then the hello resource is going to be here, and it would look like this. Add inject order manager, and here and build it, clean and build it. And what's semicolon? Okay, almost JavaScript, optional semicolon. So, and run it. Payara, now remember that. You have the order manager. Of course, completely wrong what I did. I will have to say not manager rather than status. Need for speed not available. So okay, this was a Maven application from scratch with called application server. I would say I cannot imagine it can be more productive, effective, or I mean, there is not even anything to remember. The only thing you have to remember is you only need one single dependency, which is provided Java EE API 7.0. So the question is, you know, do you need something else? So what do you need instead of this, or when it can be more productive? So let's see what the chat says. Great question. So Anonymous 89591, you know, you need more. So this is one what I show you, the essential Java EE artifact which we use in all projects. Is and there's also an example. So if you go here and search for, you get the BCE archetype, which comes with everything. Everything. Which shows, you know, the system tests and a nice BCE structure with a registrations and the resources like example sample projects. So the Spring Boot something like a profile, and in Java 7 there is no profiles. You just use everything. This Java EE API, and this is tiny. It's just a set of interfaces, and there are no additional dependencies in the war, because whatever you need is already on the server. What about registries for microservices? There are several attempts. There is one interesting one. I think it was called Snoopy GitHub. I think it was from Ivar. Oh, Snoop EE GitHub. This might be better. So this is one which I know it exists and didn't use it in projects, but it has already 45 stars, so it could be interesting. What we used as a service registry is just plain old JCache, and for instance, something like Headlands. So what Headlands is, it uses Hazelcast behind the scenes and exposes Hazelcast via REST. And what you can do is a key value in memory grid. You can store your references to REST services. We implemented something like a cluster with that in the past. But usually you only need, you know, microservice registries if you have lots of microservices. And I would say with this approach, what I explained you so far, what usually happens, a small team, 2 to 5 developers, produces one war. Let's say you have a larger project, 15 developers, which is actually really big. So you get 3 wars which communicate with each other. I don't think we need a registry in this case. You would need registry if you would have to have, you know, 50 microservices. But in this particular case, it would be, in my Java EE world, you would have to coordinate 150 to 250 developers, which cannot be any productive. Okay. So, any questions left? No questions? If there are no questions, then we are basically set. We are done. I would say thank you for watching, and see you in one of upcoming conferences. So on my blog, or oh, what I forgot to tell you, there's also a bunch of online courses called EHEX.io. So there's a Bootstrap, Effective Java EE, and Java EE testing. So if you cannot come to Munich, it's available online. This might be interesting for you. Come to Munich, or see you on the 1st February, next Monday. And there are no questions left. Of course not. Java EE is very simple, very pragmatic. So if you just look at the code, there can be no questions, right? So thank you for watching, and see you soon, and enjoy the cold winter in Sweden. So thank you and bye.